The art of framing innocent people. Strategy 1. Trigger emotional reactions. Framing Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey was easy, but the culprits could never have foreseen that a 10-part docuseries produced by Netflix would expose their deeds to a global audience. The most powerful technique to manipulate a jury's perception is to trigger emotional reactions. A jury in a hyped-up state will accept things from a prosecutor that have no basis in reality. By keeping their focus on the source of the surge of emotion, such as the grotesque description of a crime, jurors are more likely to lose their peripheral vision and be blinded from the facts, such as the absence of DNA evidence or statements from alibi witnesses. To trigger emotional reactions, prosecutors wield words, gory photos, and reenactments as weapons that assault the senses. The more dramatic, the better the effect. Setting Stephen up twice was simple because a court is not a place where justice is administered. A court is theatre. The side with the most money puts on the best show. In Stephen's case, that was the state of Wisconsin, backed up by billions of dollars of taxpayers' money. With a lack of credible evidence linking Stephen to both the assault on Penny Bernson and the Teresa Hallback murder, prosecutors began their offences by triggering emotional reactions. They opened their dramatisations with vivid, grotesque accounts of the crimes, and they continued to layer in similar details throughout the trials. With considerable cunning, prosecutor Ken Kratz employed this strategy at a law enforcement press conference held on March 6, 2006. Bespectacled and in a dark suit, portly Kratz, with his greying hair swept back, spoke in a low, coaxing, effeminate tone. I know there are some news outlets that are carrying this live, and perhaps there may be some children that are watching this. I'm going to ask that if you're under the age of 15, that you discontinue watching this press conference. We have now determined what occurred sometime between 3:45 p.m. and 10 or 11 p.m. on the 31st of October. 16-year-old Brendan Dassey, who lives next door to Stephen Avery in a trailer, returned home on the bus from school about 3:45 p.m. He retrieved the mail and noticed one of the letters was for his uncle, Stephen Avery. As Brendan approaches the trailer, as he actually gets several hundred feet away from the trailer, a long, long way from the trailer, Brendan already starts to hear the screams. As Brendan approaches the trailer, he hears louder screams for help, recognizes it to be of a female individual, and he knocks on Stephen Avery's trailer door. Brendan says that he knocks at least 3 times and has to wait until the person he knows as his uncle, who is partially dressed, who is full of sweat, opens the door and greets his 16-year-old nephew. Brendan accompanies his sweaty 43-year-old uncle down the hallway to Stephen Avery's bedroom. And there they find Teresa Hallback, completely naked and shackled to the bed. Teresa Hallback is begging Brendan for her life. The evidence that we've uncovered establishes that Stephen Avery, at this point, invites his 16-year-old nephew to sexually assault this woman that he is bound to the bed. During the rape, Teresa's begging for help, begging 16-year-old Brendan to stop, that you can stop this. 16-year-old Brendan, under the instruction of Stephen Avery, cuts Teresa Hallback's throat, but she still doesn't die. As if Stephen and Brendan had already been convicted, the news reporters supported Kratz. First male reporter. The horrible picture of how Teresa Hallback died, painted by a 16-year-old boy who couldn't keep his terrible secret any longer. Second male reporter. Investigators from here at the Calumet County Sheriff's Department and from the Wisconsin Department of Justice interviewed Brendan Dassey twice this week. They used his statements like instructions to put together pieces of a sick puzzle. According to the complaint, Dassey and Avery are accused of choking Teresa Hallback and then dragging her lifeless body outside, throwing her in the burn pit and shooting her in the head and in the stomach. Female reporter. Today's development is certainly on the minds of many. Here is what some people in the Fox Valley had to say. To stamp public approval on the media's verdict, the opinions of 3 men were aired. I'm a little surprised by the age of him, but I wasn't surprised there was somebody else involved. I think he did help him out. I don't think he was the master behind it, but I think he helped him out. You know, I believed him at first, and now it's the other way round. By seamlessly crafting together and broadcasting snippets from hours of coerced testimony from Brendan Dassey, an intellectually limited and highly suggestible teenager, Kratz turned the majority of the public against Stephen and Brendan without presenting a shred of valid evidence. The press conference was so impactful that it even turned people against Stephen who'd previously supported him. It tainted the jury pool across Wisconsin and stacked the odds in favour of a guilty verdict. When Making a Murderer broadcast the conference, many viewers, including myself, started to wonder whether Stephen and Brendan had actually committed the crimes. But as the episodes unfolded, Netflix showed the bigger picture of Brendan being spoon-fed by 2 manipulative detectives. With Kratz's illusion exposed, it began to fall apart, causing considerable outrage among the viewers. The strategy of triggering emotional reactions employed by Kratz was a carbon copy of that used by prosecutor Dennis Vogel in Stephen's first wrongful conviction. The trial commenced with Vogel extracting dramatic details from the victim, Penny Bernson. It was an assault on the hearts of the jurors. Penny and her husband, Tom, owned and ran an ice cream and candy store in downtown Manitowoc. High school sweethearts, they had married during their 3rd year at art school in Illinois. Tom's work at the YMCA had taken them from state to state. During these relocations, Penny had a baby girl, followed by a boy. After 10 years, the couple had returned to Manitowoc in 1983 to operate the candy store, which Tom's grandparents had opened in 1932. After work, Penny and her family sometimes went to Nishatar Park to swim in Lake Michigan. On July the 29th, 1985, Penny, Tom, and their 11-year-old daughter arrived at the park without their 10-year-old son who was with a friend. On the beach, Penny started to read a book about Lizzie Borden, a woman who had been tried and acquitted for the 1892 axe murders of her father and stepmother. I can't believe I'm reading such a gruesome book on a beautiful day, Penny said. I'm going for a jog. Due to the heat, she set off in her swimsuit at 3 p.m. She jogged north into Point Beach State Forest, a public area of the beach with homes. She reached a point where about 10 yards away from her, she came upon a bearded man with a black leather jacket slung over his shoulder. He seemed out of place. It's a great day, he said. Yes, it's a beautiful day for a jog. Penny continued past the man. She jogged 3 miles north and reversed course, hoping to rejoin her family by 4 p.m. A couple of minutes after 3:50 p.m., she spotted the man in the leather jacket. He emerged from underneath a half-fallen poplar tree close to the water. Knowing that she would have to jog past him filled her with dread. Approaching him, she thought, I have to get away from this guy. She swerved towards the water. The man attempted to grab her but failed. Wading through the water slowed her down. The man homed in, clasped her upper body with his arms, and pulled her ashore. A chokehold silenced her screams. We're going to go for a little walk in the woods, he said. Terrified, Penny thought, I have to stay calm. I have to get a really good look at this guy. I need to study him, to see what he looks like. As she was pushed over sand dunes, her top came off. Despite her brave resistance, including attempts to twist free and escape, the man manoeuvred her to the edge of the woods. He undid his jeans and revealed his penis. Pushing her into the woods, he managed to take off the rest of her swimsuit. Do what I tell you, I have a knife. He touched her breasts. He sucked one and bit it. Make me hard. I've been gone too long. My husband will be worried, and he'll come looking for me. Make me hard. No. He pushed her down, pinned her shoulders to the ground, and knelt over her. Several times he strangled her, until she almost lost consciousness. Now, are you going to do it? Every time she refused, he strangled her again. She was threatened with a knife and forced to touch his penis. He grabbed her breast. Play with yourself. Penny took a hand off the penis to use on herself. Now put your mouth on my penis. No. Put your fucking mouth on my penis. You're really fucking this up. Spread your legs. Spread your goddamn legs. You're fucking this up. The man responded to Penny's resistance by beating her endlessly in the face. She kicked him where it hurts. Now I'm going to kill you. You're going to die, bitch. With her skull getting smashed into the ground against either a rock or a tree root, she braced to get stabbed to death. He grabbed her nose, yanked it to the side, and she heard a bone crack. When she was on the verge of losing consciousness, the man paused. Now, are you going to do it or not? Okay, I'll do it, Penny said, trying to regain her strength. But I'm sure my husband is looking for me. I've been gone too long. Her response provoked another round of violence, which lasted several minutes. Expecting to die, Penny was sad, because she hadn't kissed her son goodbye that morning and told him that she loved him, and she assumed that her daughter's last memory of her would be a bloodied, strangled corpse, and her husband would have to raise 2 children on his own. After strangling her until she became unconscious, the man took off into the woods. Eventually, Penny's eyes opened. Flat on her back, she saw what she assumed was his blood on her hand. She thought, oh, I didn't think I scratched him, but maybe I did. This is evidence. I've got to preserve this. During the assault, she had attempted to leave scratches on his face so that he could be identified. Her vision was too blurred to see her watch. Fearful of her attacker returning, Penny attempted to stand but fell. On her hands and knees, she crawled towards the water while maintaining her palms upwards in an attempt to preserve the blood evidence. Disorientated, she thought she was heading straight for the shoreline, but she was actually zigzagging across the sand. Every so often she lost consciousness, only to revive and resume crawling. At the shoreline, naked, huddled into a ball, she spotted a couple north of her. She cried for help, but the words didn't come out right, as if she had suffered a stroke. The couple wrapped her in a towel. Do you think you can walk with our help? Yes. They headed south along the beach. In the meantime, Tom had realised something was wrong, such as his wife drowning, after Penny hadn't returned on time. He'd driven to a convenience store and called the police. He'd arranged for his father to come and pick up his daughter. He'd sent guys on jet skis searching for Penny. Heading north on the beach, Tom spotted Penny and the couple. A man tried raping me, Tom. He tried to kill me. Tom picked Penny up and ran back to where an ambulance was waiting. Penny was rushed to a hospital. In court, Prosecutor Vogel asked Penny to detail what had happened after she'd kicked the assailant in the groin. He was shaking me up and down so hard that my head and upper back were hitting the ground. Both his hands were around my neck, my windpipe, and he was kneeling over me. He was grabbing me so tight I couldn't breathe. He kept saying, "Now are you going to do it? Are you going to do it?" I remember thinking he was going to kill me if I didn't cooperate, but I couldn't say anything because I couldn't get any air. Asked how she felt after the man had gone into the woods, Penny replied, I was bruised, I was bloody, I was unable to move. It felt like my arms and legs were made of lead. I was dazed, I was humiliated. To trigger an even bigger emotional reaction from the jury, Vogel switched from Penny's testimony to an actual reenactment. Penny, what I'd like to do is just have you get up out of your chair.
Mr. Burnson, why don't you come up here?
Can you do that? What I'd like to do is go back and have you show the jury a couple of things in terms of how you were grabbed. Have your husband grab onto you. Have him take his arms or whatever and show you how you were first grabbed as you were jogging. Put your right arm there and your left arm here, Penny told her husband. Okay, initially his hand was on my shoulder. When I twisted to holler to the sailboat, he did exactly what my husband just did. He grabbed my neck and cut off my windpipe. You can let go now. For the record, Vogel said, you're demonstrating your husband has his left arm around you. His right hand would be on your right arm. Is that a fair statement? That's correct. Show me how you were being held when you were halfway into the woods, when the top of your swimsuit was removed. Okay, with this arm. Okay, he removed his left hand and then undid, I don't know, the top or the back first. At this point, I twisted. He again put his left arm around my neck and said, "Do what I tell you, I've got a knife." When you were in the wooded area or close to the wooded area, you told us about the conversation about touching his penis and so forth. Could you just show me in which position you were at the time? Okay, we were face to face. Penny, turn the other way so we can both see. You indicated before that you did touch his penis. How did you do that? With my right hand. You indicated he pushed you down on the ground. Show me how he did that. Penny directed her husband where to grab her shoulders. He grabbed both my shoulders like this. Okay. My arms were pressed against my body, and then he pushed me down onto the ground. Okay, can we just slowly do that? How was he over you? That's what I want to know. Okay, I was lying on my back like this. Can everybody see okay? Vogel said to the jury. If you can't see, stand up. Penny had her husband adjust his knees back further. She confirmed that the assailant's jeans were open and his penis exposed. With the physical reenactment coming to a close, Vogel moved on to a third medium, photos. I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 9. Do you recognize that? Yes, Penny said. It's a photo of the area of Nishita Beach. This is the tree where my assailant was standing. I'm looking northbound here. How about Exhibit 10? That's a close-up of the tree looking north. Exhibit 11? The same tree, only this time looking south. Exhibit 12? That's the same area of the beach with the tree, looking southbound. I'm standing in the water, approximately at that point, where I begin to jog into the water. My husband is standing in the shadow of the tree, where Mr. Avery was standing. What's Exhibit 8? The incline of the sand dune area that Mr. Avery pushed me up. 13? Okay, this is a picture of the wooded area where I was assaulted, and I'm standing approximately on the spot where the assault occurred. 14? This is a close-up of the wooded area where I was assaulted. I'm standing on the spot where I was assaulted, where I was lying on the ground. The trial had barely begun, and Vogel had already convinced the jury of Stephen Avery's guilt by appealing to their emotions on 3 levels: verbal, physical, and visual. Attempting to minimize the damage done so far, Stephen's lawyer tried to prevent the introduction of a photo taken in the emergency room of Penny's beaten face. The issue isn't how badly the victim was beaten, it's who committed this brutal assault. The photograph appeals to sympathy for the victim and disgust for whoever assaulted her. That's the only reason the state wants it in front of the jury, Judge. I don't believe there's any better way, Vogel said, to show the nature and extent of the victim's beating than using the photographs. The extent of the beating is critical in this case, and this photograph corroborates it. It corroborates the victim's testimony. With respect to the photographs of the injuries, the judge said, the court believes they're reasonable and valuable evidence to the jury, and while they're not exactly the most pleasant things to look at, I believe it's reasonably necessary for the state to use those photographs to demonstrate the nature and extent of the attack. Therefore, the objection is overruled. With an emergency room doctor on the stand as a witness, Vogel said, "I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 1. Is this a photograph of the way Penny looked when he saw her at the hospital that night?" "Yes, it is," the doctor said. The judge granted Vogel permission to show an enlarged photo to the jury. Creeping along the front of the jury box, Vogel took his time, allowing the jurors to absorb the full impact of Penny's battered and bloodied face. "Do you have an opinion, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, doctor, as to whether or not the bruise at the base of Penny's neck would be consistent with someone choking her?" "It very well could have been." "The degree of force required, doctor, to cause that sort of bruising, do you have an opinion, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, as to the amount of force required to cause that?" "It's relatively hard to cause the breaking of the blood vessels there to cause that kind of bruising." "Do you have an opinion, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, as to how much force would be required to cause bruising to her back the way you saw it, to a reasonable scientific certainty, that it would be consistent with Penny being shaken or pushed on the ground up and down several times?" "Could very well have been, yes." Vogel's strategy was so effective that despite 16 alibi witnesses stating that Stephen was with his family at locations too far away from the scene of the crime for him to get there and back, the jury still found him guilty of rape and attempted murder. He was sentenced to 32 years. On January the 29th, 1986, Stephen Avery wrote a letter to the judge. "Dear Judge Hazelwood, I am writing in regards to my case. I truly believe I did not get a fair trial. Why on God's green earth would I go out and hurt a woman I don't even know, and when I am happily married and my wife just got out of the hospital with our twins the day before? Why should my wife have to raise our children alone? And why should my kids have to grow up without a father? Especially when I did not do this, and I am an innocent man. I pray every night to God that the guy who did this would turn himself in, as I don't have a life setting up here, and I have to worry about my wife and 5 kids out there alone, with that guy still running around out there.
I really feel sorry of Mrs. Burnson."
As I would not want anyone to have to go through something like that. I know I've done some bad things in my past, but I started to realize it after I pulled an empty gun on Sandy Murphy, that I went about it in the wrong way, and I started to turn my life around. I had heard that Sandy Murphy wanted to drop the charges against me, but Mr. Vogel won't. Why is everybody against me? Am I really that bad? I was wondering if you could please help me and my family, as our future is in your hands. I am scared shitless as to the outcome of my case, and I am also scared for my family. I am not lying, with God as my witness. Please help me in any way you can. I would really appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Please help me thank you, Judge. Sincerely, Stephen Avery. The judge never responded. With no evidence linking Brendan Dassey to the murder of Teresa Hallback, Ken Kratz, in his opening statement to the jury, started by describing the victim. I'm going to introduce you to a lovely young woman. This is Teresa Hallback. Miss Hallback was 25 years old on Halloween of 2005. You're going to hear evidence of this case that Miss Hallback was single, that Miss Hallback was a college graduate. Miss Hallback was a freelance photographer. She was a daughter. She was a sister. She was a friend. And she had her whole life ahead of her. You're also going to hear evidence that all of that came to an end on Halloween of 2005. This story, this case, begins at about 8:12 a.m. on Halloween Day of 2005, when the plan was set into motion to take this young woman's life. The plan was set into motion to rape and to kill and to mutilate this 25-year-old innocent young woman. Kratz stated that Teresa was a photographer for Auto Trader, whom Stephen Avery had lured, using his sister's name and phone number, to a salvage yard under the auspices of taking a picture of a car that he wished to sell. The Avery salvage yard was 40 acres of junked cars. The 4 trailer residences on the property included Stephen's, which was next to the one owned by Brendan Dassey's mother in the northwest corner of the property. The other 2 belonged to Stephen's parents and his brother, Chuck. After Teresa was reported missing, a citizen's search conducted at the salvage yard had located her vehicle. Kratz started layering in details about Teresa's blood. On Monday, the 7th Crime Lab make a startling discovery. Remember, the SUV of Teresa was taken to the crime lab for processing. They found male blood in 6 different locations in the SUV, and they found a great deal of female blood in the back, or what's called the cargo area of Teresa's SUV. These were the first results they had gotten. They didn't get any DNA results back yet, but they could tell it was male blood. They could tell that it was both female blood. After the blood, Kratz focused on the bones. And the third and most chilling discovery, on the 8th, the evidence will show is this burn area, a few feet behind the garage of Stephen Avery. You're going to hear evidence that within this burn area, obvious human bone fragments were found. You're going to hear that the crime lab came to process this scene, that arson investigators came to process the scene. They recovered, at least on that first day, as many of the bones as they could recover. This is a photo that just assists you and explains why it took until Tuesday to find these human remains in that area. All right? The recovery of those bones, you will hear, were in very, very small size. They were also very degraded. They were charred. But they were all examined by a forensic anthropologist. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the case. What you need to know on Wednesday is that they were able to say that they're human bones and they're from an adult female. Then he got down to the business of provoking emotional reactions. But let me also warn you, because it's fair for me to do this, that some of the details may be disturbing. Now we have to give you those details. Brendan Dassey in, again, sometimes graphic detail, will talk about approaching Uncle Steve's trailer, and before he even knocks on the door, he hears screaming. He hears screaming from inside of the trailer, and he knocks on the door. You're going to hear that Stephen Avery answers the door. You're going to hear that he's sweaty, and that he tells Brendan Dassey that he has raped this woman, and that he has in the back of his bedroom. These are difficult, hard images to kind of wrap your mind around, but this is the version that Brendan Dassey gave on the 31st of October. Brendan actually sees Teresa tied up. He sees her shackled with handcuffs and leg irons to the back bed in the back bedroom. And here, when we talk about decisions, Mr. Avery himself asks Brendan if he wants to have sex with the woman that's been restrained in the bedroom now. Some of the language is very graphic. They don't use the word, "Do you want to have sex?" All right? They use some very, very crude, degrading language towards any woman, but certainly towards a young woman who was in this trailer already. When we talk about those decisions that Brendan gets to make this point, Brendan says, "Yes, I want to do that." You're going to hear that Brendan Dassey rapes Teresa Hallback. You hear that he walks into the bedroom while Teresa's restrained on the bed, and by force and by violence, and with the use and threat of a weapon, he had sexual intercourse with this woman without her consent. After the rape, Stephen Avery praises his nephew and says, "That's how you do it." These are explanations again from Brendan. The repulsive expression, lack of empathy, lack of any kind of moral fibre, any kind of moral compass at all, for an uncle to tell a nephew, "That's how you do it." Then Stephen and Brendan discuss if they should and how they should kill Teresa Hallback. Again, the decision tree. What does Brendan decide to do? Steve says, "Will you help me?" Brendan says yes. You'll hear testimony about Stephen and Brendan going into the bedroom. Stephen Avery stabs the victim. Brendan Dassey, handed the knife by Uncle Steve, cuts Teresa Holbach's throat. You're going to hear that they take this 25-year-old woman, unclothed, to the garage. They place her on the floor. Dassey waits with Teresa Holbach, who is not yet dead, laying on the floor, as Mr. Avery retrieves his .22 caliber Marlin Glenfield semi-automatic rifle. And Brendan says Uncle Steve shoots her 10 times, at least twice in the head, including on the left side of her head. Kratz then detailed the mutilation and burning of the corpse. With the jury being played Brendan's confession in court, the teenager didn't stand a chance. Despite no DNA or physical evidence linking him to the crime, he was convicted of being party to first-degree murder, mutilation of a corpse, and second-degree sexual assault. He was sentenced to mandatory life in prison, with the possibility of parole set for November 1st, 2048. Stephen and Brendan were doomed because the decision-making of the jury wasn't logical. It was based on emotion. Knowing that, all the prosecutor had to do was to keep the jury focused on the gruesome details and distracted from the absence of any evidence. In Wisconsin's Alice in Wonderland justice system, theatre usually triumphs over facts. But on the off chance that this strategy had failed to sway the jury, the authorities employed numerous